The only time I've been on this road, right after I got acquainted with the Spencers, they hauled their cattle down here to feed off the stuff in the fall, and I talked them into driving them to Yost from here, and that's the only time I've been on this whole road.
Oh, the old stagecoach route used to come through here, and all the wagons, they'd come up from Kelton across, and then they would cut off this way. About right here, it was somewhere up here where the road turned and then went over, didn't go to Stervell.
No, it went to Standrock.
Went to
Clear
Naff.
Creek, Naff, through that way.
Yeah.
There's still a road there.
Yeah.
We've been on it before. Yeah.
And the old story, you know, about the Brackenbury murder.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Well, they came up, they got all boozed up in Kelton, bought plenty of alcohol, and they were coming up and they got to where they were going to camp for the night. And they made their campfire and drank a little more booze, and the older man said, I'm going on. You know, I'm leaving. And he was not happy with the drinking and the noise. And the Brackenbury said, you're not leaving, I'm going to go get him. And he hopped on his horse, and he was heading off over here with his wagon. And they must have camped, the way it sounded, right close to the junction in the road up here. And they never came back, neither one of them. The next day, they broke camp, went over, and it was about 2 miles over. They found the wagon, the horses, and the wagon driver was dead, shot. And, of course, the Brackenbury headed off for Almo, packed up, and was heading for Montana. And his dad was the sheriff, Cassia County Sheriff. And his brother talked him into giving up. He was up by Glenn's Ferry, and they talked him into turning around and giving up. And he came back, gave up, was tried. And they put him in the Utah State Penitentiary, and a couple of years later he died under mysterious conditions, and no one could ever find out how and why. You've heard that story.
Oh, I've heard bits and pieces, but you've told me a lot more than I know.
Well, that's what we researched for Deanne.
Oh, okay. She's the one I probably heard it from.
Yeah, and he said, beware the bottle. You know, there's evil spirits in the bottle. And then about 10 years later, his brother went over to Oakley for a dance in November late at night, and decided to leave. He had to get back to Almo, hopped on his horse and headed up through Birch Creek, and it was a terrible storm. Stopped at a cabin to refresh himself a bit, hopped on the horse, went a little further, and then you know more about that.
Jim is the guy.
Anyway, he got off his horse, they said, because his tracks went a little further, and then he sat down and froze to death, and he was a victim of the bottle because he had drunk too much before he left Oakley. Now, is that right, Jim?
Yeah, he come up Trail Canyon. Emery Canyon was too much snow for him.
But he's right on Trail Canyon.
And
He comes from the Junction Valley over into the City of Rocks area south of Emery Canyon.
Yeah.
Move over closer to Janice so that you can
then his horse give out,
that microphone.
and he took the saddle blankets and wrapped his legs and took off in the snow. And he got partner down to where the main road is now, and they found him kneeled down. He'd scraped out a place in the snow and had a bunch of grass or bush in his hand to make a fire. And that's where they found him. And I made a little plaque and wrote on that, a metal plaque, and stamped in there, and it's still there, that was where they found him. There was a mound of rocks. And I got this from, well, a lot of the old people, Veer Durfee and them all knew that story, and we had sheep in that vicinity, and so I've lived with that.
There was an article in the Oakley Herald, you know, about him going to the dance, and then they tried to talk him out of going back, but he wouldn't. And at the bottom of the article, it indicated that he was also a victim of the bottle, because he'd had too much to drink. He shouldn't have gone. So.
Well, that's really brave medicine.
Connie, you know so about this place.
Well, all I know is what Nolan told me, that his dad, Carl Oman, and his mother's father and grandfather brought the mail from Yost to Kelton with a wagon and a team of horses, and they would stay here at the Tracy place. Go, I don't know, both ways or one way, as they took the mail to Kelton, when Kelton was the thriving community. And
13 saloons in Kelton.
right, there were 13 saloons and one school.
Yeah.
And
Janice, for Cedar Creek, where we are, this, there again, wherever there was water, some sort of drainage, you would find the homesteads and something like Cedar Creek. Now this was a stage station. It was here at this area where any of the settlers, the homesteaders' roads, congregated here. Now the Salt Lake alternate from clear back before 1847 called Hensley's Road. Hensley was a man that knew how to get from Bear River to City of Rocks. All right, that path was up around the Great Salt Lake, and the book, this one, California Trails, and I got this over at Elko just last fall, and boy, it's a dandy. It shows Hensley's route from Snowville, a bulge down here, and then Hensley's route went over through here and up this, here north of us, or south of us rather. And there's no question but what people use all of these roads through here. But the map shows right up this, like up these section lines right here, were roads with all sorts of crossroads across here. Now, this Cedar Creek was the site. You could stay. There was a home station, stage station, that is horses, a place to stay. And for Elba area, and Jim, I think, can tell you some of the stories of the homesteaders, the people, getting their cattle together and driving them to Kelton to the railroad. Now, that had to be after 1869. So, all right, before that was road and stage station here. Now, Cedar Creek was a place where Wells Hepworth told the story of a cattle drive coming through. And the buyer, right here somewhere, was an old boy that stepped out to watch his cows go by, and he had on a long black coat. And Wells said the old son of a bitch stepped out, and those cattle took one look and took off for the Rose Ranch. He said they came to a sheep camp. They didn't tip it over, but they sure knocked it around. Now, Pilot Spring is right down here a ways, just down over the bluff. That well-known thing down there, well, they went right on through there, and the Rose Ranch cowboys helped them round up the cattle and go on. Now, Art Ward told me the same kind of story of cattle drives over here. So Cedar Creek was the place. Then, after 1869, it developed more and more. This was on the freight road. People undoubtedly went south of us, out to the hills there, and this highway over here, developed later, after we began to develop highways and roads. Now, according to the book, this pass is the Kelton Pass. We call it over Stravell Pass. Not so, according to the Kelton Pass. So, okay, you're in a very historic place. And undoubtedly, the Tracys and others may have stayed on. Cedar Creek was not really a stage station anymore, probably completely after the freight road days. Anyway, very historic place. You're right in the middle of it here. Have you got anything, Jim Sheridan, about the stories of getting together and coming over here for the railroad?
Well, this was a route from Kelton, say to Boise, and it went through Alamo, and there was all horses pulling wagons. And that barn that I've got on our place used to stand right where Edwards lives now. That was the livery stable. Of course, you see, they did all this freight with horses, and they'd have to have a place to keep them, say, overnight or maybe a day or two. And my dad moved that livery stable up on the ranch in 1929.
Okay, we've got Olin Eames with us and Jim Lloyd both, and we will talk to them certainly some more at Kelton about their experiences. But the question for now is, Olin or Jim, do you remember coming through here, or how you came through when you, Olin, went with your dad, with Lou Eames, or Jim with his dad? Was it this particular road, or were we off over here a ways?
You know, Stan, Jim Lloyd gave me a picture, and when I was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and my dad, this picture's got the old Model T truck. Yeah. I think he had one of the first old trucks in the valley, because he used to freight for everybody, even the guys down to Malta and around, and you know, haul freight. And I remember the trip, the first time I ever saw us, a locomotive with blowing the smoke out the top. We was down to Kelton. I was standing there, and we was waiting for the train to come, and Dad said, "Here comes the train." So I looked down through the sagebrush. All you could see was that black smoke shooting up out of the grass, see. And when that thing came up there, I was half scared of it. I run and got in the old truck. Dad, he was laughing at me, you know, and one thing and another.
By then, was this where we are? In other words, we left, what's the highway now, back over here north of us. We're out here a mile or so. This was the route. This was the road, I assume.
We come through this area,
right
here. Mm-hmm.
And probably most of the freight went right on and out. There is a trace yet. You can see from up on Graham Peak. You can look out here toward Stravel, and you can see a path across down to Bridge, down that way. Now, Arlo is mad because that was called the Oregon Trail. And it was the Oregon Trail to the Oregon Trail. Now, this deal, the Forest Service has taken off their maps. It's on the older maps. So, all right, when you began hauling a batch of freight, you couldn't be off out somewhere in the hills and the draws. And that path on down across there, and Arlo has a sign that says, California Trail, Shoshone Falls Route. Oregon Trail, Shoshone Falls Route. But that was, there's no doubt about it, was the Oregon Trail to the Oregon Trail. So, all right, that sign that he found was posted out south of Kaiser Creek over there. We used to drive the cattle through into 9 miles out south of Malta where we had the farm. But there were those cutoff roads, and same thing here, too. Roads all over the place. The map here is just a bunch of fun of roads every which way, and we'll talk about that later when we get a chance.
I have another sideline to this coming down to Kelton to haul freight. I remember that when we'd leave Alamo early in the morning, you know, before sunup, they'd done this in this old truck. And this old truck had I wish I'd have brought that picture with me. I'd have showed it to you. It didn't have a door on the right side. That's where we sat, and Dad was on the left side driving it and steering it. And we was going across the flat from Stravel over toward Naff, and I think we got past Naff a little ways, and there was no gravel roads. It rained that day, and it was muddy. And the right rear wheel of that old truck slipped into the badger hole, and that just stopped just like that. And it threw me out in the sagebrush. And in those early days, they used to ship peanuts in big round barrels, like a stave with staves on the barrel, wooden barrels. Well, that barrel fell out in the sagebrush, and it cracked open, and there's peanuts scattered around, and then in the shell, round in the brush. Dad made my brother and I pick up all those peanuts. Be sure we put them back in that barrels. Well, we got stuck there, and it was toward dark. It was getting dark. So we left it, and we walked down to the EY ranch in the middle of the night, and Dad carried my brother on his shoulder, and I was old enough to walk. I know it was a long walk. When we got down there, the EY ranch, I think a man by the name of Sanders lived there. Anyway, we borrowed an old mare, an old gray mare that he had there we could ride to go on to Alamo. And this was probably around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Well, we all three, Dad and I and my brother, rode this old mare to Alamo. We got there about 2 o'clock in the morning. My mother was fit to be tied. She didn't know what had happened to us. And anyway, that was just a side story to it. Dad hurried up and got up early in the next morning and got somebody to help him go back and get that truck out, because he was afraid somebody would come along and haul the freight off, see.
Jim, what do you remember, Jim Lloyd, about how long it took to get down to Kelton? How long would you be? Would you indeed come through here?
It'd take 2 days to get down there, and then another day to get loaded up and back to Stervell, and I guess maybe 4 days or 5 days on the route.
You're talking about team and wagon.
Team and wagon, yes.
Well, they said on the stagecoaches that left Kelton, they would average 8 miles an hour with a good team of horses. And one of their first stops was here. And then they would go on through to Immigration Canyon, which was an overnighter if they wanted to. And then down to Birch Creek, Oakley Meadows, Rock Creek, which was another overnighter. But a good team of horses in the stagecoach could make 8 miles an hour. The only problem was it was dusty, it was hot, and the people's lips would get just, with this alkali dirt and dust, they'd get chapped. And the other thing that was interesting, with the stagecoaches is they'd come out of the railroad, and here was this beautiful stagecoach sitting there. And they'd hop in the stagecoach and take off, and it would come to the first stop, and then they would stop. They'd get on not a rickety, but a real solid old rough stagecoach and head on, and the new stagecoach and turn around and go back to Kelton. Because people thought they were going to get a ride clear to Oregon on a good stagecoach, but they didn't.
They have that new stagecoach for chummin'.
That's right.
Well, I think we might move along. Next stop, 2 miles or something, is Baby Gravesite, known now as Immigrant Spring.